The bitter winter wind howled across the remote military outpost in Afghanistan, where Sergeant Jake Martinez had spent the last 8 months serving his country. The temperature had dropped to dangerous levels, and the snowfall had been relentless for 3 days straight. Jake pulled his heavy coat tighter as he made his way through the compound, his breath forming thick clouds in the freezing air. What made this deployment different from his previous tours was his four-legged companion, Rex, a German Shepherd mix who had wandered into their base 6 months earlier. The dog had been thin, scared, and covered in scars from what appeared to be a hard life on the streets. Despite military regulations about keeping animals, Jake couldn't turn away from those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to plead for help. Rex had quickly become more than just a stray dog. He had an uncanny ability to sense danger, alerting the soldiers to potential threats long before their equipment could detect anything. The dog had saved their lives on multiple occasions, barking frantically when insurgents approached their perimeter, or when improvised explosive devices were planted near their patrol routes. The commanding officers, initially reluctant to allow Rex to stay, soon recognized his value and officially made him the unit's mascot. Jake and Rex formed an unbreakable bond. During the long, lonely nights when homesickness crept in, Rex would curl up beside Jake's cot, providing comfort that no letter from home could match. The dog seemed to understand when Jake was struggling with the weight of his responsibilities, always appearing at just the right moment with a gentle nudge or a warm presence. The other soldiers in the unit grew to love Rex as well. He brought joy to their difficult circumstances, playing fetch during downtime and performing tricks that never failed to make them laugh. Rex had a particular talent for stealing socks from the laundry line, which became a running joke among the troops. The dog would parade around the compound with his prize, tail wagging proudly, until someone would chase him down to retrieve the stolen item. As Jake's deployment neared its end, he began making plans to bring Rex home to his family in Colorado. He had already started the complicated process of arranging for Rex to be transported to the United States, filling out paperwork and coordinating with animal rescue organizations that specialized in bringing military dogs to America. His wife Sarah and their 2 young children were excited to meet the dog who had become such an important part of Jake's life overseas. The paperwork was almost complete, and Jake had received approval from his commanding officer to begin the transport process. Rex seemed to sense that something was changing, staying closer to Jake than usual and following him everywhere around the base. The dog's intelligence was remarkable, and Jake often wondered if Rex understood that their time together in Afghanistan was coming to an end. On what would turn out to be their last normal day together, Jake and Rex went on their usual evening patrol around the perimeter of the base. The snow had started falling again, but it was light and peaceful, creating a serene atmosphere that was rare in their dangerous environment. Rex trotted beside Jake with his usual alertness, stopping occasionally to investigate interesting scents or to mark his territory. As they completed their rounds and headed back to their quarters, Jake felt a sense of contentment that had been missing from his previous deployments. Having Rex by his side had made the difficult months bearable, and he looked forward to the day when they would both be safely back home. He had no way of knowing that the peaceful evening would be their last together, and that the worst snowstorm of the winter was approaching faster than anyone had predicted. That night, as Jake settled into his cot with Rex curled up at his feet, he listened to the wind beginning to pick up outside their shelter. The weather reports had mentioned a possible storm, but nothing that seemed particularly threatening. Rex shifted restlessly, his ears perked up as if he could sense something that the humans couldn't detect. Jake reached down to pet the dog's head, whispering words of comfort before drifting off to sleep, unaware that Mother Nature was about to test their bond in the most devastating way possible. Jake woke to the sound of emergency sirens piercing through the howling wind. The storm had intensified overnight, transforming from a gentle snowfall into a full-scale blizzard that threatened to bury their entire outpost. Snow was piling up against the windows of their shelter, and the temperature had plummeted to life-threatening levels. The base commander's voice crackled over the intercom system, barely audible above the roaring wind. All personnel were ordered to remain in their designated shelters until the storm passed. The weather station reported that the blizzard could last for several days, with wind speeds reaching dangerous levels and snow accumulation that could exceed 6 feet in some areas. Rex paced nervously around their small shelter, whimpering softly as the building shook under the force of the wind. The dog's instincts told him that this was unlike any storm they had experienced before. Jake tried to calm his companion, but he was equally concerned about their situation. The heating system was struggling to keep up with the extreme cold, and their food supplies were limited. As the hours passed, the storm showed no signs of weakening. Jake watched through the small window as snow drifts grew higher and higher, threatening to completely block their view of the outside world. Communication with other parts of the base became increasingly difficult as the storm interfered with their radio equipment. By the second day, the situation had become critical. The heating system in their shelter failed completely, leaving Jake and Rex to huddle together for warmth under every blanket and piece of clothing they could find. Rex seemed to understand the gravity of their situation, pressing close to Jake and sharing his body heat. The dog's loyalty never wavered, even as their circumstances became increasingly desperate. Jake knew they couldn't survive much longer without heat. Despite the orders to remain in their shelter, he made the difficult decision to attempt reaching the main building, where emergency generators were keeping the heating systems operational. The distance was only about 50 yards, but in blizzard conditions it might as well have been 50 miles. He bundled up in every piece of winter gear he owned and prepared Rex for the dangerous journey. The dog seemed eager to move, perhaps sensing that staying in their current location was no longer safe. Jake opened the door to their shelter, and they were immediately hit by a wall of wind and snow so intense that it was difficult to breathe. The visibility was virtually zero. Jake could barely see his own hands in front of his face, let alone navigate to the main building. He held tightly to Rex's leash, using the dog's superior senses to help guide them through the whiteout conditions. Rex pressed forward determinedly, his nose to the ground as he tried to follow familiar scents that might lead them to safety. They had made it only halfway to their destination when disaster struck. A massive gust of wind, stronger than anything they had encountered before, knocked Jake off his feet and sent him tumbling into a deep snowdrift. The force of the wind tore Rex's leash from his grip, and Jake watched in horror as his beloved companion disappeared into the swirling white chaos. Jake fought desperately to get back on his feet, calling Rex's name at the top of his lungs, but his voice was swallowed by the storm. He stumbled blindly through the snow, searching frantically for any sign of his dog. His hands were already becoming numb from the cold, and he knew that exposure would soon become a serious threat to his own survival. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Jake realized he had to make a heartbreaking choice. He could continue searching for Rex and risk both their lives, or he could try to reach the main building and organize a rescue effort once the storm passed. With tears freezing on his cheeks, he made the agonizing decision to continue toward safety, promising himself that he would find Rex as soon as humanly possible. Jake barely made it to the main building, collapsing just inside the entrance as other soldiers rushed to help him. He was suffering from early stages of hypothermia and frostbite, but his only concern was for Rex. Through chattering teeth, he tried to explain what had happened, begging his fellow soldiers to help him organize an immediate search party. The base commander had to physically restrain Jake from going back out into the storm, explaining that any rescue attempt would have to wait until the weather conditions improved. The blizzard raged for 3 more days, each hour feeling like an eternity to Jake as he worried about Rex's fate. He barely slept, spending most of his time staring out the windows of the main building, hoping to catch a glimpse of his beloved companion. The other soldiers tried to comfort him, sharing stories of dogs who had survived incredible odds and assuring him that Rex was smart enough to find shelter. Jake's mind raced with terrible possibilities. Was Rex injured and unable to move? Had he found some kind of shelter to protect himself from the freezing temperatures? The thought of his loyal friend suffering alone in the storm was almost unbearable. Jake had seen what extreme cold could do to living creatures, and he knew that without proper shelter, survival was unlikely. The medical officer had treated Jake's frostbite and mild hypothermia, but no amount of medical attention could heal the anguish in his heart. He refused to eat more than a few bites of food, his appetite completely gone. His fellow soldiers took turns sitting with him, trying to keep his spirits up, but Jake remained inconsolable. On the 4th morning, the wind finally began to die down, and the snow stopped falling. As soon as visibility improved enough to see more than a few feet ahead, Jake was ready to begin the search. He had gathered emergency supplies, including blankets, food, water, and a first aid kit, hoping against hope that he would find Rex alive but possibly injured. The base commander authorized a search party consisting of Jake and 3 other volunteers. They were equipped with radios, GPS devices, and probe sticks to help them search through the deep snow drifts. The landscape outside had been completely transformed by the storm. Familiar landmarks were buried under massive amounts of snow, making navigation extremely difficult. Jake led the search party to the area where he had last seen Rex, but the swirling snow had erased all traces of their footprints. The searchers spread out in a grid pattern, calling Rex's name and listening carefully for any response. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunching of their boots in the deep snow. They searched methodically for hours, using their probe sticks to check underneath snow drifts and behind any structures that might have provided shelter. Jake's heart sank with each passing hour as they found no sign of Rex. The other soldiers began to gently suggest that they might need to expand their search area or consider the possibility that Rex had not survived the storm. As the sun began to set on their first day of searching, Jake was exhausted both physically and emotionally. His fingers were numb from the cold despite his heavy gloves, and his voice was hoarse from calling Rex's name. The search party had covered a significant area around the base, but the vast expanse of snow-covered terrain seemed endless. That night, Jake couldn't bring himself to sleep in the warm building while Rex might be somewhere outside cold and alone. He sat by the window wrapped in blankets, keeping a vigil and hoping for a miracle. Several times during the night he thought he heard faint barking in the distance, but when he alerted the others, they heard nothing but the wind. The second day of searching began before dawn, with Jake leading an even larger team of volunteers who had offered to help look for Rex. Word of the missing dog had spread throughout the base, and everyone understood how much Rex meant not just to Jake, but to their entire unit. The dog had become a symbol of hope and companionship in their difficult deployment. They expanded their search radius, venturing further from the base than they had the previous day. The snow in some areas was so deep that they had to use snowshoes to avoid sinking completely. Jake's determination never wavered, even as some of the other searchers began to lose hope. He refused to consider the possibility that Rex was gone forever. Late in the afternoon of the second day, one of the searchers thought he saw something dark protruding from a large snowdrift near the edge of their search area. Jake's heart pounded as they approached the spot, afraid of what they might find. Using their hands and small shovels, they carefully began to dig through the snow, hoping they weren't too late to save Rex if he was buried underneath. As they dug deeper, Jake's worst fears seemed to be confirmed. They uncovered what appeared to be Rex's dark fur, but the dog was completely motionless and partially frozen. Jake's legs gave out from under him as he knelt beside his companion, tears streaming down his face as he prepared to say goodbye to the friend who had meant more to him than he had ever imagined possible. Jake's hands trembled as he gently brushed the snow away from Rex's still form. The dog's body was cold and rigid, and Jake could see no signs of breathing. His heart shattered into a million pieces as he pulled Rex close to his chest, not caring about the cold seeping through his clothes. The other soldiers stood silently around them, removing their helmets in a gesture of respect for the dog who had served alongside them with such courage and loyalty. Through his tears, Jake whispered apologies to Rex, telling him how sorry he was for losing him in the storm. He promised that he would never forget the joy and comfort Rex had brought to their unit during the darkest days of their deployment. The weight of grief was overwhelming, and Jake felt as though he had lost not just a pet, but a battle buddy who had saved his life countless times. Sergeant Rodriguez, one of Jake's closest friends in the unit, gently placed a hand on his shoulder and suggested they bring Rex back to the base so they could give him a proper burial once the ground thawed. Jake nodded numbly, unable to speak as he carefully lifted Rex's body. The dog felt surprisingly light, as if the life force that had made him so vibrant and energetic had taken most of his physical weight with it. The journey back to the base was somber, with the search party walking in respectful silence. Jake carried Rex the entire way, refusing offers from others to help share the burden. It was the least he could do for his faithful companion, who had given so much and asked for so little in return. The setting sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered landscape, creating a melancholy atmosphere that matched Jake's broken heart. Back at the base, word of Rex's death spread quickly among the soldiers. Many came to pay their respects, sharing stories of how the dog had touched their lives during his time with their unit. Rex had been more than just a mascot. He had been a source of hope and happiness that had helped them all cope with the stress and danger of their deployment. Jake wrapped Rex's body in his own blanket, the same one they had shared during cold nights in their shelter. He sat with Rex through the night, talking to him as if he could still hear, recounting their favorite memories together. He told Rex about the home he had prepared for him in Colorado, describing the large backyard where they would have played fetch and the warm fireplace where Rex would have slept on cold winter nights. The base chaplain came to sit with Jake, offering words of comfort and helping him process his grief. They talked about the special bond between humans and animals, and how Rex's loyalty and love had made him more than just a pet. The chaplain assured Jake that his feelings of loss were valid and important, and that grieving for Rex was a natural response to losing such a significant relationship. As dawn broke over the base, Jake finally allowed exhaustion to overtake him. He fell asleep with one hand resting on Rex's still form, finding a small measure of peace in maintaining that physical connection, even though his friend was gone. The other soldiers made sure Jake was covered with additional blankets and that someone was always nearby in case he needed support. Jake slept for nearly 12 hours, his body and mind finally succumbing to the stress and grief of the past few days. When he woke, he found that the base commander had arranged for a special ceremony to honor Rex's service to their unit. Word had even reached military officials back in the United States, who had sent messages of condolence and recognition for Rex's contributions to their mission. The ceremony was planned for the following day, giving Jake time to write a letter to his family explaining what had happened. He struggled to find the words to describe his loss, knowing that his wife and children had been looking forward to meeting Rex. They had already purchased a dog bed, toys, and food in preparation for Rex's arrival, and Jake knew they would be heartbroken to learn that their new family member would never make it home. During the ceremony, soldiers from across the base gathered to pay their final respects to Rex. The base commander spoke about the dog's courage and the comfort he had provided to their unit during difficult times. Several soldiers shared their own memories of Rex, painting a picture of a remarkable animal who had somehow understood his role in supporting the men and women serving their country. Jake was asked to speak about Rex, but he found himself too emotional to say much beyond a simple thank you to his friend for everything he had given them. As the ceremony concluded, Jake felt a sense of closure beginning to form, though the pain of loss remained sharp and immediate. He knew that Rex's memory would stay with him forever, and that the lessons of loyalty, courage, and unconditional love that Rex had taught him would continue to influence his life long after he returned home from deployment. 2 days after the memorial ceremony, Jake was sitting alone in the recreation area, staring at a photo of Rex on his phone, when Corporal Martinez burst through the door with an expression of urgent excitement. The young soldier had been one of the volunteers who helped search for Rex, and Jake could see that something important had happened. Martinez was breathing heavily as if he had run across the entire base to find Jake. Martinez grabbed Jake by the shoulders and looked him straight in the eyes before delivering news that would change everything. He explained that he had been checking the storage areas behind the maintenance building when he heard what sounded like very faint scratching noises coming from beneath a large pile of snow and debris that had accumulated during the storm. At first, Martinez thought it might be rodents or the building settling, but the scratching had a rhythmic quality that seemed almost deliberate. Something had compelled him to investigate further, and he had begun carefully digging through the snow pile. What he found underneath defied all logic and expectation. Rex was alive, buried in a small air pocket that had formed when falling debris created a natural shelter during the blizzard. The dog was weak, dehydrated, and suffering from mild hypothermia, but he was breathing and responsive. Martinez had immediately called for the base medic and was now asking Jake to come quickly to see Rex before they transported him to the veterinary area they had set up in the medical facility. Jake's mind reeled as he tried to process this impossible news. He had held Rex's cold, lifeless body in his arms, He had grieved for his lost friend and even attended a memorial service. The idea that Rex could be alive seemed like a cruel joke, or a stress-induced hallucination. Martinez insisted it was real, grabbing Jake's hand and pulling him toward the door. The run across the base to the maintenance building felt like it took forever, even though it was only a few hundred yards. Jake's heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear, afraid to believe what Martinez was telling him but unable to ignore the possibility that somehow, miraculously, Rex had survived. As they approached the area behind the building, Jake could see a small crowd of soldiers gathered around something on the ground. When Jake saw Rex lying on a stretcher, wrapped in warming blankets with an IV line providing fluids, he nearly collapsed from the shock. The dog looked terrible, much thinner than when Jake had last seen him, with matted fur and visible signs of his ordeal. But Rex's eyes were open, and when he saw Jake approaching, his tail gave the faintest wag of recognition. Jake dropped to his knees beside the stretcher, hardly daring to touch Rex for fear that this might all be a dream. Rex lifted his head slightly and managed to lick Jake's hand with a dry tongue, confirming that this reunion was real. The base medic, who had been monitoring Rex's vital signs, explained that the dog was severely dehydrated and malnourished but appeared to have no serious injuries. The mystery of how Rex had survived began to unravel as the soldiers examined the makeshift shelter where he had been found. It appeared that when the storm reached its peak intensity, debris from the maintenance building had been blown around, creating a small cave-like structure. Rex had somehow found the shelter and had been trapped inside when additional snow and debris sealed the entrance. The air pocket that had kept Rex alive was barely large enough for a dog his size, and he had been surviving on melted snow for water and his own body fat for energy. The medic estimated that Rex could not have lasted much longer in those conditions, making his rescue a matter of hours rather than days. The discovery had been nothing short of miraculous timing. As Rex began to respond to the IV fluids and warming treatment, his personality started to return. He managed to eat small amounts of food and seemed to recognize all the soldiers who had come to check on him. The base commander authorized the use of emergency medical supplies to ensure Rex received the best possible care. Recognizing that the dog's survival had become a symbol of hope for the entire unit, Jake refused to leave Rex's side during his recovery, sleeping on a cot next to the makeshift veterinary area and helping with his care around the clock. The bond between them seemed even stronger after their separation, as if both had gained a deeper appreciation for what they meant to each other. Rex's survival had reminded everyone on the base about the power of hope and the importance of never giving up, even in the most desperate circumstances. The most puzzling aspect of the entire situation was the identity of the dog Jake had originally found in the snow. A thorough investigation revealed that it had been another stray dog, similar in size and coloring to Rex, who had apparently sought shelter in the same area and had not survived the storm. The mix-up had been understandable given the extreme conditions and emotional stress of the search, but it had led to the premature conclusion that Rex was dead. Rex's recovery was nothing short of remarkable. Within a week of his rescue, he was back on his feet, though still weaker than before his ordeal. The veterinary specialists, who consulted on his case via video conference, were amazed at his resilience and attributed his survival to his strong will to live and the excellent physical condition he had been in. Before the storm, the story of Rex's miraculous survival spread far beyond their small outpost in Afghanistan. Military newspapers picked up the story, and it eventually made its way to major news outlets back in the United States. People were captivated by the tale of loyalty, loss, and redemption that represented the best of the human-animal bond even in the harshest circumstances. Jake received hundreds of letters and emails from people around the world who had been touched by Rex's story. Many shared their own experiences with beloved pets who had overcome incredible odds, while others simply wanted to express their gratitude for Jake's service and their joy at Rex's survival. The overwhelming response reminded Jake that stories of hope and love resonate with people everywhere, regardless of their circumstances. The attention also brought unexpected opportunities. Several animal welfare organizations reached out to offer assistance with Rex's transportation to the United States, streamlining the process that Jake had originally started before the storm. Legal experts volunteered their time to navigate the complex regulations surrounding military animals. and veterinary clinics offered free services to ensure Rex would be healthy for the journey home. As Jake's deployment neared its end, the preparations for Rex's journey to America intensified. The dog needed extensive medical clearances, vaccinations, and documentation before he could enter the United States. Every step of the process was carefully monitored to ensure Rex's safety and comfort during what would be a long and stressful journey halfway around the world. The other soldiers in Jake's unit had become even more attached to Rex after his near-death experience. They organized a farewell party in his honor, complete with dog-friendly treats and toys that had been sent by supporters from around the world. Rex seemed to enjoy being the center of attention, his tail wagging constantly as he received pets and praise from his human friends. During his final weeks in Afghanistan, Rex resumed many of his duties around the base. Though Jake was careful not to let him overexert himself, the dog's survival instincts seemed even sharper than before, and his ability to detect potential threats remained as impressive as ever. The commanding officers noted in their reports that Rex continued to be a valuable asset to their security operations right up until his departure. Jake spent countless hours during those final weeks simply sitting with Rex, reflecting on their journey together and the lessons he had learned from his four-legged companion. Rex had taught him about loyalty, courage, and the importance of never giving up hope, even when circumstances seemed impossible. These were lessons that would serve Jake well long after he returned to civilian life. The logistics of Rex's transportation were complex, involving coordination between military transport, commercial airlines, and animal welfare organizations. Rex would fly first to a military base in Germany, where he would undergo additional health checks and rest for several days before continuing to the United States. From there, he would travel to Colorado, where Jake's family was eagerly preparing for his arrival. Jake's wife, Sarah, had kept their children informed about Rex's adventure and survival, turning it into a story of hope and resilience that helped them understand the challenges their father faced during his deployment. The children had drawn pictures of Rex and prepared a special welcome banner for his arrival. They had also helped their mother puppy-proof their house, installing safety gates and removing any potential hazards. The local community in Colorado had also embraced Rex's story, with the town newspaper planning to cover his homecoming and local businesses offering donations to help with his care and transition to civilian life. A veterinary clinic had volunteered to provide Rex's medical care for his first year in the United States, and a pet supply store had donated enough food and toys to last for months. As the day of Rex's departure from Afghanistan approached, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. He was thrilled at the prospect of bringing Rex home to his family, but he also worried about how the dog would adapt to such a drastically different environment. Rex had spent most of his life in harsh, dangerous conditions, and adjusting to the safety and comfort of suburban Colorado would be a significant transition. The night before Rex's departure, Jake lay awake thinking about everything they had been through together. From Rex's arrival as a scared, wounded stray to his transformation into a beloved member of their military family, and finally to his miraculous survival and upcoming journey to a new life in America. Their story had been filled with challenges, heartbreak, and ultimately triumph. The morning of Rex's departure arrived with clear skies and unusually calm weather, as if nature itself was blessing their journey home. Jake had barely slept, spending most of the night ensuring that Rex's travel crate was perfectly prepared with comfortable bedding, familiar toys, and enough supplies for the long journey ahead. Rex seemed to sense that something important was happening, staying close to Jake's side and watching every preparation with alert, intelligent eyes. The entire unit gathered at the helicopter landing pad to say goodbye to Rex, forming an honor guard as Jake carried the dog's travel crate to the aircraft. Many of the soldiers had tears in their eyes as they saluted their four-legged comrade, knowing they might never see him again. Rex looked back at them through the crate's window, his tail wagging as if he understood he was embarking on a grand adventure. Jake accompanied Rex on the first leg of the journey to the military base in Germany, unwilling to let his companion travel alone after everything they had been through together. During the flight, Rex remained calm and trusting, occasionally placing his paw against the crate door where Jake's hand rested on the other side. The connection between them remained strong, even through the barriers of travel regulations and safety requirements. At the German military base, Rex underwent his final health inspections and received clearance for entry into the United States. The veterinary staff were amazed by his recovery and commented on his excellent temperament despite the stress of travel. Rex seemed to understand that each step was bringing him closer to his new home, and his spirits remained high throughout the process. The transatlantic flight to the United States was Rex's first experience on a commercial aircraft, but he handled it with the same courage he had shown throughout his military service. The airline crew, aware of his story and military background, took special care to ensure his comfort during the journey. When the plane touched down in Denver, Rex had officially become an American resident. Jake's family was waiting at the airport with barely contained excitement. Sarah had brought their children, 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Tyler, who clutched handmade welcome signs and could hardly stand still as they waited for Rex's arrival. When Jake emerged from the customs area with Rex on a leash, the reunion was everything he had dreamed of during those long months overseas. Rex approached Jake's family with cautious curiosity, his military training evident in his calm, observant demeanor. Emma and Tyler had been coached on how to properly greet a new dog, and they waited patiently for Rex to sniff their hands before gently petting his head. The moment Rex's tail began wagging enthusiastically, everyone knew that he had accepted his new family. The drive home to their suburban neighborhood was filled with laughter and excitement as the children peppered Jake with questions about Rex's adventures. Rex sat calmly in the back seat, looking out the window at the unfamiliar landscape of his new country. Everything was different from the harsh desert environment he had known in Afghanistan, from the green lawns to the peaceful streets lined with family homes. When they arrived at the house, Rex explored his new territory with the same thoroughness he had shown on military patrols. He investigated every room, sniffed every corner, and seemed to approve of the large fenced backyard where he would be able to run and play safely. The children followed him around like devoted fans, already completely smitten with their new 4-legged family member. That first night in his new home, Rex seemed unsure where he should sleep. Jake had prepared a comfortable dog bed in the living room, but Rex wandered throughout the house as if he was still on guard duty. Eventually, he settled on the floor beside Jake and Sarah's bed, positioning himself where he could keep watch over the entire family while they slept. In the weeks that followed, Rex's adaptation to civilian life was remarkable. He learned the rhythms of family life, understanding when the children left for school and when they would return. He became Emma's devoted companion during her afternoon homework sessions and Tyler's enthusiastic playmate during backyard adventures. The bond between Rex and the children grew stronger each day, as if he had appointed himself their personal protector. Rex's story continued to inspire people long after his homecoming. Jake began speaking at veterans events and animal welfare fundraisers, sharing their experience and advocating for programs that help military animals transition to civilian life. Rex would often accompany him to these events, serving as a living example of the incredible bond that can exist between soldiers and their animal companions. The local veterinarian who had volunteered to care for Rex became a close family friend, amazed by the dog's intelligence and resilience. Rex's medical checkups revealed that he had made a complete recovery from his ordeal in the snow, with no lasting physical effects from his near-death experience. His survival had become a testament to the power of hope, love, and the unbreakable bonds that can form between humans and animals even in the most challenging circumstances. Years later, as Jake watched Rex playing in the backyard with his children, now teenagers who couldn't imagine life without their 4-legged brother, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them all together. Rex had started as a stray dog in a war zone and had become the heart of their family, teaching them all about loyalty, courage, and the miraculous power of love to overcome even the most impossible odds.